Okay, we're back. Welcome to The Future is Socialist, episode 2, with your host, Emberly McCullough. And I hope sound is on. Just asking in chat if people can hear me. I think it was user error. What happened before? All right, so we're going to start over. I did a podcast. I did one before, but it looks a little silly. Let's see. So for our first segment is going to be current events for March 11th, 2021. From Democracy Now!, we can't just move on. AOC and Rashida Tlaib demand accountability for the deadly Capitol attack. So let's get into this about the January 6th attack. Yeah. If you think that AOC and Rashida Tlaib are being ridiculous because they feel that they can't just move on or that the country can just move on from what happened on January 6th, you are sadly mistaken because we can't just move on. I mean, seriously, people, do you really honestly think that when a traumatic event happens, that people can just move on? I mean, let's be realistic. Let's hear what AOC and Rashida Tlaib had to say. So, Rep. AOC says 29 days ago on January 6th of 2021, insurrectionists attacked our Capitol seeking to overturn the results of our nation's election. 29 days ago, the glass in and around this very chamber was shattered by gunshots, clubs, by individuals seeking to restrain and murder members of Congress, duly elected to carry out the duties of their office. 29 days ago, Officer Sicknick, who just laid an honor yesterday in our nation's capital, was murdered on the steps just outside this hallowed floor. 2 Capitol police officers have lost their lives since, in addition to the 4 other people who died on the events of January 6th. 29 days ago, food service workers, staffers, children ran or hid for their lives from violence deliberately incited by the former president of the United States. Sadly, less than 29 days later, with little to no accountability for the bloodshed and trauma of the 6th, some are already demanding that we move on, or worse, attempting to minimize, discredit, or belittle the accounts of survivors. In doing so, they not only further harm those who were there that day and provide cover for those responsible, they also send a tremendously damaging message to survivors of trauma all across this country that the way to deal with trauma, violence, and targeting is to paper it over, minimize it, and move on. And Rashida Tlaib also spoke. Here she is. This is so hard because, as many of my colleagues know, my closest colleagues know, on my very first day of orientation, I received my first death threat. It was a serious one. They took me aside. The FBI had to go to the gentleman's home. I didn't even get sworn in yet, and someone wanted me dead just for just existing. More came later, uglier, more violent, one celebrating and writing the New Zealand massacre and hoping that more would come, another mentioning my dear son Adam, mentioning him by name. Each one paralyzed me each time. So what happened on January 6th? All I could do was thank Allah that I wasn't there. I felt overwhelming relief, and I feel bad for Alexandria, so many of my colleagues that were here. But as I saw it, I thought to myself, thank God I'm not there. I saw the images that they didn't get to see until later. My team and I decided at that point we'd keep the death threats away. We try to report them, document them to keep them away from me because it just paralyzed me. And all I wanted to do was come here and serve the people that raised me, the people that told my mother, who only had an 8th grade education, that she deserves human dignity, people that believed in me. And so it's hard. It's hard when my 7 brothers and 6 sisters beg me to get protection, many urging me to get a gun for the first time. And I have to tell you, the trauma from just being here, existing as a Muslim, is so hard. But imagine my team, who I lovingly just adore. They are diverse. I have LGBTQ staff. I have a beautiful Muslim that wears her hijab proudly in the halls. I have Black women that are so proud to be here to serve the country, and I worry every day for their lives because of this rhetoric. I never thought they would feel unsafe here. And so I ask my try not to dehumanize what's happening. This is real. And you know, many of our residents, from the shooting, all of it. All of it's led by hate rhetoric like this. And so I urge my colleagues to please take what happened on January 6th seriously. It will lead to more death, and we can do better. We must do better. Thank you. Now, what and Rashida Tlaib are talking about in this is that trauma is real. Trauma is a real thing. It affects everyone differently. Just asking chat if anyone can hear me again. I guess I'll just have to look on my phone and see if the video is, make sure that the audio is working. And we have several other stories to get to, so we'll get to those in just a minute. I just got to check this before I get 30 minutes into a video realizing that there's no audio. Okay. 30 minutes of work gone down the tubes. But such is life. Hello, hello. Hello. Okay, so sound is working. Excellent. Thank you. Shout out to my wonderful son who helped me figure out what the problem was. All right, the next story we're going to talk about comes from the World Socialist website. Federal prosecutors reveal Oath Keeper founder directed members during January 6th fascist assault. So we have all of these people who are now getting in trouble because they were actually at the far right wing people were at the deadly Capitol attack on January 6th. Sorry, guys. I just needed a little help here. In 3 separate court documents filed in the last week, founder of the far-right Oath Keepers militia group, Stuart Rhodes, was identified as having communicated with indicted members of the group in the lead up to and during the assault on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Now, what really annoys me about this particular story is that people were going on and on and on talking about how, Antifa was there and Black Lives Matter protesters were there, and they were the ones who caused all the violence and the death and the destruction of the US Capitol. But now we know that it was groups like the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, which we will talk about later, the Boogaloo Boys, the Oath Keepers, obviously the story we're talking about right now. While Rhodes has yet to be formally charged, prosecutors in the documents allege that Rhodes urged his followers, who would later break into the Capitol and delay the certification of the Electoral College vote, to be prepared for violence. Prosecutors allege Rhodes instructed the group to bring non-lethal weapons to Washington, D.C., and directed them to possible entrances into the Capitol. Far-right militias, such as the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and 3 Percenters, played the leading role in spearheading the assault on the Capitol on January 6th. Of the over 300 people charged so far, nearly 20 have claimed membership in the Proud Boys, and at least 12 have ties to the Oath Keepers. An ongoing tally by NPR identifies 53 arrestees with ties to extremist or fringe groups or ideas. The allegations against Rhodes emerged in court papers filed late Monday night by the prosecutors in response to a motion for release filed by defense lawyers for former Navy commander and alleged Oath Keeper leader Thomas Caldwell, 66, of Virginia. And what's incredibly frightening about all this is that Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, 3 Percenters, the Boogaloo Boys, these have a lot of former military members involved. There were a lot of former military members involved in the January 6th Capitol riots. This is a scary thing. I was in the military from 1992 to 1996. I served on active duty at the Navy EOD school in Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. While I was there was a gentleman who had a spider web tattoo on his elbow. He had lots of tattoos. He was a white supremacist. He had white supremacist tattoos, and he would not leave me alone. Even back then, this was like 1992. Okay. 1993. Right-wing extremists, right-wing militias have been around a long, long time, and they have been hurting people for a long, long time. And this is just the latest in their hurting people, scaring people, terrifying children, and, cooks and, nannies and representatives and these people who are, who work at the Capitol every single day. What is going on? I don't understand it. How these right-wingers can see they can do this. In arguing against releasing Caldwell, prosecutors disclosed text and social media communications made between him, Rhodes, and fellow Oath Keepers in the months preceding the attack on the Capitol. The months preceding. So this was not like, hey, the day before, everybody like got a text message from the president to come out and storm the Capitol. No, this was a long time planned. This was planned out for at least 2 months, because it's about 2 months between the election and then the swearing in, or not the swearing in, but the electoral college vote. So it's roughly 6 weeks to 2 months between those. So they had time, 6 to 8 weeks, to plan for this. The communications demonstrate that the actions of January 6th were not a spontaneous event, but the result of conspiracy organized by former President Donald Trump aimed at blocking certification of the Electoral College vote, overthrowing the victory of Joe Biden, and paving the way for Trump to assume dictatorial powers. Prosecutors allege that Rhodes was part of a signal encrypted text group called DC Op Jan 6 21, along with previously indicted Oath Keeper members Kelly Meggs and Jessica Watkins, and regional Oath Keeper leaders from multiple states across the country. In the chat, members and affiliates of the Oath Keepers discussed coming to Washington, D.C. on January 5th and 6th to provide security to speakers and VIPs at the event. Person 1, identified by prosecutors as Rhodes, warns the group not to bring in anything that can get you arrested. Leave that outside D.C. Rhodes adds, we will have several well-equipped QRFs, quick reaction forces, outside D.C. So they were prepared. And there are many, many others from other groups who will be watching and waiting on the outside in case of worst-case scenarios. That is definitely frightening. Rhodes offers advice for circumventing DC gun law restrictions, telling the group he highly recommends a C or D cell flashlight if you have one. Collapsible batons, I keep wanting to say batons, but it's batons, are a gray area in the law. I bring one, but I'm willing to take that risk because I love them. Good hard gloves, eye protection, helmet, and a pinch you can grab mechanics gloves, and a batter's helmet from Walmart. Bring something to put on your noggin. Antifa likes bricks. I think he meant Antifa likes bricks, but he wrote Antifa likes bricks. The prosecutors noted that these messages echoed previous calls to action authored by Rhodes. It is critical, in all caps, that all patriots who can be in D.C. get to D.C. to stand tall in support of President Trump's fight to defeat the enemies, foreign and domestic, who are attempting a coup through the massive vote fraud and related attacks on our republic. We Oath Keepers are both honor-bound and eager to be there in strength to do our part, including preparing to do whatever must be done to honor our oaths, read the Oath Keepers website on January 4th. There is no doubt that far-right militias working in concert with the Trump White House and the Republican Party coordinated their actions on January 6th, along with sections of the police, military, and intelligence agencies. Now, that is a frightening sentence. Let me read that to you again. There is no doubt that far-right militias working in concert with the Trump White House, and the Republican Party coordinated their actions on January 6th, along with sections of the police, military, and intelligence agencies. So we can't even, who do we trust then? If we've got our former president and his administration, the Republican Party, and all of these far-right militias working with police, military, and intelligence agencies. The sections of the police, military, this is completely frightening. Who do we trust? Who do we trust within the police? Who do we trust within the military? Who do we trust within the intelligence agencies? If we can't trust the police, which we can't, the military, which we can't, and the intelligence agencies, which we can't, we need to be able to trust those members, those groups, those agencies. We need to be able to trust them. It's vital to our national security, to our security, our Americans, our non-right-wing militia groups, everyday Americans out there trying to live their life, leftists trying to make the world a better place for all of us. We need to be able to trust these institutions, because if we cannot trust them, then what do we do? Where do we go? I wish I had the solution. I don't really know. The only way that I know how to combat right-wing extremism is through love. I don't know any other way to do it. hitting people, hurting people, shooting people, throwing people, stabbing people, pushing them down, hurting them, hitting them, kicking them. This is not the way. I mean, eventually, if we have to have a revolution, because I think it might happen, guys. And another story I'm going to talk about in a little while, one of my main stories, is about that. What could happen? The Oath Keepers are closely connected to the fascistic Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA, which was founded by former Arizona Sheriff Richard Mack, who was also a founding board member of the Oath Keepers. CSPOA sheriffs that have backed Trump and fascist militias include Joe Arpaio, David Clark, and Dar Leaf. Now, I don't know who Dar Leaf is, but I know who Joe Arpaio is and David Clark, two very outspoken. Joe Arpaio was the creator of I don't know how else to call them, death camps in Arizona for incarcerated people, the death camps in the middle of the desert. Yeah, he's a great guy. David Clark is also not a great guy. Dar Leaf, I don't know. But Richard Mack, I know. Joe Arpaio, I know. And David Clark, I know. No, I don't know them personally, but I do know of them. It is not a coincidence that the same right-wing forces that were mobilized in opposition to the public health measures to stem the spread. I'm sorry, let me try that again. It is not a coincidence that the same right-wing forces that were mobilized in opposition to the public health measures, COVID-19, yeah, they were to stem the spread of the coronavirus, are the same forces that instigated the assault on January 6th. Trump's tweets to liberate Michigan and liberate Virginia were dress rehearsals for the January 6th coup attempt in D.C. Similar to Leaf justifying the attempted assassination plot of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer as simply a citizen's arrest, the court documents filed on Monday cite an unknown male who participated in recorded Oathkeeper radio communications justifying the storming of the Capitol by claiming, "You are executing citizens' arrest. Arrest this assembly, Congress. We have probable cause for acts of treason, election fraud." In both instances, the Democrats have played the leading role in covering up and downplaying the fascist conspiracies, even when they are the initial target. The Democrats are terrified that exposing the plots would reveal that they are directed by the same social interests behind the herd immunity policy, which the Democrats also support. The numerous ties between the Trump White House and fascist militias was further exposed with the charging of 2 more Oath Keepers in the last week. This past Sunday, New Jersey Oath Keeper member Roberto Minuta, 36, was arrested at his home by FBI agents. Minuta faces several charges, including obstructing an official proceeding, entering a restricted building, and tampering with the documents and proceedings. Prosecutors allege Minuta aggressively berated and taunted U.S. Capitol police officers and attacked the U.S. Capitol and obstructed congressional proceedings with other attackers. Minuta was previously identified by the New York Times as one of the Oath Keeper bodyguards who accompanied Trump political crony Roger Stone while he was on D.C. on January 5th and 6th. The Daily Beast has also confirmed that Minuta was in D.C. providing security for former Trump National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn during the December 12th pro-Trump march. Minuta was also in D.C. for the November 14th Million MAGA March, where he provided security for InfoWars founder and fascist conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, who paid at least $50,000 to speak at a January 5th Trump rally in D.C. In a January 2020 interview with the Virginia Mercury, Minuta revealed that he had come to join 10,000 other pro-Trump gun activists and militia members during the state's Lobby Day demonstration because he had heard about it on Jones' show. Minuta became a lifetime Oath Keeper in May 2020 after defying public health orders by reopening his tattoo shop. In a video congratulating Minuta for violating public safety measures, Rhodes says that he is honored to have him as a member of Oath Keepers. Minuta said he opened his shop as a display of defiance against a tyrannical dictator. They are truly idiotic. The tyrannical dictator was Trump. On Tuesday, a second Oath Keeper who provided security to Stone ahead of the January 6th assault was also arrested. Joshua James, 33, was charged with obstruction of Congress and entering the Capitol without permission. In charging documents, James is identified as one of the Oath Keepers participating in the STAC military formation that was seen entering the Capitol. The affidavit also notes that James was in communication with another Oath Keeper dubbed Person 5 during the November 12th and December 14th rallies in D.C., during which Person 5 provided personal security detail for one or more speakers at the events, per the prosecutors. This language indicates that more information about the role of fascists in organizing the January 6th plot is yet to come. I mean, how did they not know? How did the Capitol Police not know that this was going to happen? I think in later, once we've put some time and distance between, maybe in a year or so, we'll find out more about this. As the FBI does its case and finds more of these people, honestly, and figures out what to charge them with, and then we'll have the trials. So we'll see what's going to happen. I have a feeling it's going to be a huge spectacle. But what can you do? And then from the WSWS also, let's see if I can find this. Everything got messed up. Arkansas governor signs near total ban on abortion. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson signed into law new legislation on Tuesday which will ban all abortions except to save the life of the mother. The law does not provide exceptions for rape or incest and threatens those found in violation of the law with a fine of up to $100,000 and up to 10 years in prison. The law will not go into effect until 91 days after the end of the current legislative session on May 3rd, providing plenty of time for legal challenges to the law to be heard in court. This is the latest attempt by Republican-run states to contest the 1973 ruling of Roe v. Wade. Arkansas Bill SB 6 is specifically designed to violate the ruling and bring a challenge before the U.S. Supreme Court. Governor Hutchinson said of the bill, SB 6 is in contradiction of the binding precedents of the U.S. Supreme Court, but it is the intent of the legislation to set the stage for the Supreme Court overturning current case law. At least 14 other states have attempted similar legal challenges this year, according to Politico, but all have seen their laws struck down by lower courts. The Arkansas law follows similar legislation passed in South Carolina last month, which was struck down by a federal judge. It revisits another attempt by the Arkansas legislature to pass a ban on abortions after 18 weeks in 2019, before that was also struck down by the courts. The current wave of anti-abortion laws comes after 3 right-wing Supreme Court justices were appointed by the President Donald Trump. The appointment of Brett Kavanaugh in the summer of 2018, giving the Supreme Court an openly anti-abortion majority, emboldened those seeking to challenge Roe v. Wade through the courts. Now that the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett has given the ultra-right a 6-3 majority, Republican leaders believe that they have an even better chance of succeeding. However, any one of the numerous anti-abortion laws that have been struck down across the country could be taken up by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. But Republican legislatures continue to pass such laws even when they are almost guaranteed to be overturned by federal courts, in a continuous effort to manufacture a semblance of mass public support for overturning abortion rights across the country. Arkansas State Senator Jason Rapert, great name, who sponsored the bill, said that he hoped the law would compel the court to respond to a very broad, widespread public outcry on the issue. However, there is no such mass support for banning abortion. Research from Gallup indicates that the proportion of Americans who support total bans on abortion have remained around just 20% of the population since 1975. While many support some restrictions on abortion, 60% oppose overturning Roe v. Wade and 58% oppose fetal heartbeat laws. Even in southern states, the majority does not support such laws, with just 47% in favor. A May 2018 Gallup survey also found that 60% of Americans believe that abortion should be legal within the first 3 months of pregnancy. Despite the lack of support for total bans on abortion, the Republican Party has based its assault on abortion rights on appeals to the most conservative and fervently religious sections of American society. It must be stressed that the Republican Party has done nothing to protect the lives of working-class Americans after they are born, and its policies of war and the persecution of immigrants betrays even the name pro-life. If the Republican Party truly cared about the lives of unborn children, then it would invest heavily in social programs and women's health to ensure that every child is born into conditions that it will not have to suffer from poverty, hunger, or abuse. Instead, the Republican Party has made it a point of public policy to cut as many social services as possible. For its part, the Democratic Party has also cut social programs and has failed to seriously defend abortion rights. The Democratic Party has consistently shied away from fighting to make abortion a permanent legal right. Instead, they have channeled all support for abortion rights behind Roe v. Wade and used appeals to protect a revocable court ruling to garner electoral support. I don't understand why Republicans think that they can just do whatever they want with women's bodies. They want to own women's bodies so that we cannot have autonomy over our own bodies. Now, I am not in favor of abortion for myself, but I am in favor of abortion for every other woman in the world. It is not up to me. As a woman, it is not up to me to force other women to feel and think and do as I do. What's even more insulting is that these are men who think that they can tell other women and myself what we can think, feel, and do. You know what? Why don't you, Mr. Hutchinson, Governor Hutchinson, and State Senator Rapert, mind your own damn business? Why don't you look at yourself and your state? Because you know what? Arkansas ain't doing that great. Let's see. How is state of Arkansas doing? Arkansas, let's see. State of the state. How's it doing? How is Arkansas doing? Oh, let's see. Gosh, my eyes. Let's see. How is I don't want to read as all right, top stories. Yeah. Arkansas. Top stories for Arkansas today are the U.S. state of Arkansas outlaws almost all abortions, and Arkansas governor signs near total abortion ban into law. Let's see here. Arkansas is a southern U.S. state bordering the Mississippi River. It's known for its abundant park and wilderness areas with terrain encompassing mountains, caves, rivers, and hot springs. The rugged Ozarks region in its northwest has hiking trails and limestone caves such as Blanchard Springs Caverns. Its capital, Little Rock, hosts the Clinton Presidential Center, housing Bill Clinton's presidential archives. So the governor is Asa Hutchinson, capital is Little Rock. It ranks 29th in area, and minimum wage is higher than the federal. It's at $9.25 per hour as of January 1st, 2019. So that's not too bad. I mean, but it is a southern state. And it's bordering the Mississippi River. And how is it doing? Let's look at the official site. Anyway, Arkansas. Why don't you focus on the people in your state, getting them health insurance, making sure there are no homeless people, making sure everyone has food, adequate, good food, farming, gardens, the thing, not a near total ban on abortion. It's business, Asa Hutchinson. It is absolutely none of your business if I get an abortion, especially if it is in the case where it could kill me or, well, this law does, provide for that. But of course, it's men who are going to be deciding how a woman's going to be able to get an abortion if her life is in danger. But what are those rules? Who's going to decide those rules? Who's going to decide whether some poor Black woman in Arkansas who already has 3 children and can't afford another one, but she also can't get birth control. So, because she doesn't have health insurance, so what is she going to do? So she goes to Planned Parenthood and gets an abortion. So now Arkansas is going to put her in prison. Her children, because she might be a single mother, she might not be, but she's definitely working poor, whether or not she's a single mother or not. This puts stress on her children because if she gets put in jail or fined $10,000 or serves up to 10 years in jail for this abortion, then her kids won't get to know her because her kids will be, they'll be teenagers. If they're little kids, they'll be teenagers or they'll be adults by the time she's done. And this will destroy her family. So what Asa Hutchinson and Jason Rapert are trying to do, and Republicans all over this country, they are trying to destroy families. I remember being castigated because I was a single mother. I had my son out of wedlock, and I love him. And I shouldn't have to be married just to have a baby. It doesn't matter. Women's rights are important. Women's rights we have fought hard for these. I haven't. I'm not quite old enough. But my grandmother and the people of her generation and my great-grandmother's generation, those women fought so that women today can have the rights that we have. I would urge all women leave Arkansas and Republican states. If this is what they're going to do, then those men can just go be gay. Because if there are no women around, I guess they're going to have to be gay because, men can't help themselves, right? This is all about men trying to tell women what to do. Again, Republican men love to tell women what to do. They just love it. You know what I think? They would love it if we lived in The Handmaid's Tale. If that story, which is frightening at the least, it's frightening. They would love that. Oh, yeah. Be able to kill anybody you want anytime for the slightest infraction. Being able to legally rape. Didn't we already decide that husbands can't legally rape their wives? If a husband forces his wife to have sex, that's rape. Women have the right to not consent. But in The Handmaid's Tale, handmaids don't have the right to not consent. They are forced into being sexual playthings. All right, on to the next story. Mass protests erupt in Paraguay over disastrous handling of the pandemic. Yeah, things are not going so well for Paraguay. So it's a little rough right now. Let's see if we can find the article. Paraguay. I was able to find the other ones. Let's see if I can search for Paraguay. Well, it helps if I... Yes, here we go. Mass protests erupt in Paraguay over disastrous handling of the pandemic. As COVID-19 deaths and cases reach record levels in Paraguay, mass demonstrations have erupted for a second consecutive week over the disastrous response to the pandemic by the government of the country's fascistic president, Mario Abdo Benitez, I think is how you say it. Teachers were the first to protest last week, with many refusing the mandatory return to school on Tuesday, March 2nd. The following day, nurses, doctors, patients, and family members demonstrated outside of the main COVID-19 hospital in the capital of Asuncion to protest the lack of medicines, including sedatives for intubating patients and vaccines, even for frontline workers. While Paraguay faces a massive surge in the pandemic that has filled all ICU beds in public hospitals, the country has received only 4,000 vaccine doses for a population of 7 million, and officials have no estimate for when more doses will arrive. Paraguay has confirmed almost 170,000 cases and 3,343 deaths. Oh my gosh. Amid these explosive conditions, the initial actions by teachers and medical workers triggered widespread marches and roadblocks across the country. The hashtag Estoy para el marzo Paraguayo 2021 was widely used to rally protesters, referring to the month-long protests of the Paraguayan March 1999. Health Minister Julio Mazzoleni resigned last week in an unsuccessful attempt to head off the growing unrest. On Friday, in the biggest demonstration so far, over 10,000 people flooded the streets of Asuncion, demanding the ouster of President Abdo Benitez and the entire Colorado Party government with the chants, "Out Marito, and all of them will leave. Out Marito, all of them will leave." The use of tear gas, and rubber bullets by anti-riot police set off a series of confrontations with young demonstrators. One 32-year-old man was killed under unclear circumstances, and 21 others were injured on Friday. Demonstrations and roadblocks have been particularly large in the second most populated city, Ciudad del Este, next to the Iguazu Falls on the border with Brazil and Argentina. As the repression continued on Saturday, Abdo announced the firing of his chief of staff, Juan Ernesto Villamayor, the Minister for Women, Nilda Romero, and Education Minister, Eduardo Peta. Demonstrators had attacked Peta in particular over the reckless reopening of schools. The new health minister, Julio Borba, said yesterday that the government was considering a 2-week suspension of in-person instruction, a wholly inadequate measure. Medical experts such as Gloria Meza, president of the Maine Doctors Association, insist that only a return to strict lockdown measures can contain the surge in cases. The government's announcement and reshuffling have done little to appease the protest movement, which expresses a broader international intensification of the class struggle against the almost universal policy of placing profits and social austerity over lives during the pandemic. The government's announcements and reshuffling have done little to appease the protest movement, which expresses a broader international intensification of the class struggle against the almost universal policy of placing profits and social austerity over lives during the pandemic. Even more fundamentally, protesters have made clear that their anger is being fueled by the staggering levels of social inequality exposed by the crisis. Maguay, a Paraguayan demonstrator, explained to the World Socialist website that it all began with a march organized on social media due to the president's horrible management even before the pandemic. The healthcare system collapsed years ago. There are no beds, no medicines. We help each other. There are no medicines for the people. We are sick of the Colorado Party, sick of being governed by the son of the dictatorship like President Abdo, she said, referring to the fact that Abdo's father was the personal secretary of the fascist dictator Alfredo Stroessner. Maguay added, "I hope that the protests spread. I think almost all Latin America is facing the same situation. I believe a unified struggle would have a great impact." Opposition parties around the Great Renewed National Alliance, GANAR, led by the right-wing Liberal Party and the pseudo-left Guasu Front of ex-President Fernando Lugo, have so far struggled to control the unrest. They have introduced futile motions in Congress to impeach Abdo without having enough votes to proceed. Liberal leader Efrain Alegre feigned support for the protests and made demagogic and vague calls for a new model, while Fernando Lugo has promoted the impeachment drive while declaring, "We don't agree with changing people. We demand a change of the face of the country." The pandemic has shown, however, that whatever the political colors or ostensible model, including that of Lugo's close Peronist allies in Argentina, all capitalist governments across the region and beyond have advanced fundamentally the same response of reckless reopenings at the behest of the financial oligarchies. What is most important for Abdo is the support of Washington. In a March 1st letter, U.S. President Joe Biden thanked Abdo for congratulating him on his election, adding, "I appreciate your government's engagement on security issues and coordination with regional partners." Subsequently, the White House has remained quiet on the repression of peaceful protests by the Paraguayan authorities. Abdo's disastrous pandemic response. In late March 2020, Abdo implemented a strict lockdown, including night curfews and the shutdown of non-essential activities. The General Director of Healthcare Services, Juan Carlos Portilla, explained later, "We were conscious that our healthcare system is weak." As early as May 4th, however, an intelligent confinement was implemented to gradually lift restrictions. Even by June 15th, when restaurants and bars opened, only 13 coronavirus deaths had been reported. In late July, movies, religious services, and other cultural gatherings were permitted, and the remaining restrictions were lifted by early October. Contrary to most of the region, schools were allowed to reopen on a voluntary basis. Predictably, cases and deaths saw a massive surge starting in July that has continued until today. During 2020, according to the UN Economic Commission for Latin America, the limited social assistance for non-essential workers and those going unemployed to shelter at home was on average just 34% of the poverty line. In a country where 1/5 of households live under official poverty and 60% of workers depend on the unprotected informal sector, the meager assistance compelled workers to return to work as soon as possible to avoid total immiseration. The IMF estimates that Paraguay's GDP fell 1% for 2020, much less than neighboring countries. While most countries in the region saw daily cases drop by late February after a holiday surge, Brazil and Paraguay continued to set one record after the other. In the last month, Paraguay's 7-day moving averages jumped from 700 to 1,345 daily cases and from 16 to 21 daily deaths. The evolution of the pandemic in Brazil and Paraguay constitutes a grave warning for the world. Experts have suggested that the surge is a result of the spread of the more infectious variants from Brazil after thousands traveled there for holidays. However, this has not been confirmed due to the lack of genetic tracing of the virus. Paraguay's Colorado Party has held power almost continuously since the Higinio Morinigo Martinez dictatorship took power in 1940, supporting the Nazis until their defeat in World War II, and then quickly shifting its allegiance to U.S. imperialism by accepting a few months of democratic liberties. In 1947, the Colorados prevailed in a bloody civil war against rebelling soldiers, workers, and youth that the Stalinist Communist Party helped subordinate to a popular front alliance led by the oligarchic Liberal Party and the Febreristas, who had just left the Moringa regime. The Colorados received military support from the Truman administration in the U.S. and Juan Domingo Perón's government in Argentina. Continued factional disputes within the military, especially between the U.S.-backed Stroessner wing and the Perón-backed wing led by Epifanio Mendez Flieta, were settled in a 1954 coup supported by the Eisenhower administration. Stroessner then consolidated control until 1989 through a fascist terror regime, including death squads, concentration camps, widespread torture, and the crushing of the CP, the trade unions, and a guerrilla movement. The coming to power of Stroessner was facilitated by the efforts of the Stalinists to subordinate all opposition among workers and peasants since the early 1930s to the Liberal Party and one or another faction of the military brass. The Liberal Party is the twin party of the Paraguayan capitalist oligarchy, and like the Colorados, is subordinated to U.S. imperialism and its financial and geopolitical interests. The U.S.-backed Stroessner regime also carried out systematic massacres and land grabs from the indigenous populations, including the physical destruction of the tribe, and like the left nationalist Juan Domingo Perón in Argentina, rescued and sheltered numerous Nazi officials in the post-war period. Fernando Lugo was elected in 2008 in a coalition led by the Liberal Party and backed by the Stalinists. While using Lugo to channel opposition behind bourgeois politics, the ruling class, fearing growing expectations of social reform, overthrew Lugo in 2012 with the backing of the Obama administration. The continued support by the Paraguayan ruling class and U.S. imperialism for the political descendants of the barbaric Stroessner regime is a warning for workers and youth everywhere about the shift toward dictatorship and fascism by the capitalist ruling classes internationally in response to the pandemic crisis. This was most clearly shown by the January 6th coup attempt by Donald Trump in Washington itself. So, as you can see, and I'm sure, as you have heard, we are not the only country that has had a disastrous response to the coronavirus. Many countries have had a disastrous response because I feel so, I have to tell you that I feel so bad for South America, Central America, and Mexico because of the way the American government has treated these people. It is absolutely disgusting the way we have treated South Americans, Central Americans, and Mexicans. I am done with that. I don't know how people can live with themselves treating these people as if they are unequal compared to me or you. You know what? We're all equal. Okay? We might not all be completely equal, okay? Because I have gray hair, you might have blonde hair, I have blue eyes, you might have green eyes, you might have curly hair, I have kind of straight hair. I mean, we are equal in the ways that matters, in political ways. Okay? We need to be equal, all of us across the world. No one is better than another person. No one is more special than another person. One life is more important than any other life. Republicans need to hear this. Right wingers need to hear this. You can go F yourself if you think that you're better than me, because you're not. No one is better than another person. Politicians are not better than us. We often valorize and kind of, I don't know, the word I'm looking for is not infantilize, but I know the word, I just can't think of it. Glorify. We tend to glorify politicians and think that, that they're the be all end all and that the president is like the top dog of everything, but Donald Trump kind of displaced all of those. And the global south knows, because they've lived through it, through US imperialism, always messing around in other countries. Maybe right now it's happening. Joe Biden just bombed an Iraqi militia fighting ISIS in Syria. Our president, Joe Biden, just bombed an Iraqi militia that was fighting ISIS on literally on the world's behalf, because ISIS is a terrible thing. And yet Iraqis in Syria fighting against. Do you know why they did it? Do you know why? Watch Katie Halper's show with the journalist Rania. I can't remember her last name. Yusuf. No, not Yusuf. Rania Kalik. So Katie Halper just did a show with Rania Kalik, and she lives in I think Beirut. I know she lives in Lebanon. I think it's Beirut. She's a journalist, and she discussed what was happening with the bombing. She knows a lot about it, and that's where I got my information from, was that podcast or that show on YouTube. I will see if I can link it in the description box after the video is done. Okay, guys? All right, so we're going to move on to our next story now. Every day, or at least every week, I'm going to be highlighting a political prisoner. Today's highlight is Mumia Abu Jamal, a long time political prisoner here in the U.S. He has tested positive for COVID-19, and we want him released on compassionate care reasons. He has other health problems, including hepatitis C, I believe, hepatitis C, which is, I don't believe there's a cure for that, or even a really great treatment for that. So Mumia Abu Jamal. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to read it. I can't talk about it. It upsets me a lot. Hold on. Sorry, I'm looking. Okay, I don't know where it is. The article. Maybe I'll just have to Google it. Google it. Mumia Abu Jamal COVID. Oh. So from 2 days ago, the Philadelphia Inquirer says Mumia Abu Jamal loses 30 pounds while recovering from COVID-19. Holy cannoli. Mumia Abu Jamal has lost 30 pounds since testing positive for COVID-19, as a long-term skin condition has flared up, leaving bloodied open wounds all over his body, said one of his supporters. Oh my gosh. On Monday, Abu Jamal appeared to be recovering from COVID-19 and no longer receiving intravenous fluids, as he remained isolated in the infirmary at Mahanoy State Correctional Institute in Frackville, said Johanna Fernandez, an associate professor of history at Banuch College of the City University of New York, CUNY. Fernandez said Abu Jamal's body weight has dropped to 215 pounds from 245 pounds since receiving a positive COVID-19 test on March 3rd. After speaking with Abu Jamal directly on Sunday, Fernandez said, "It seems that the worst of COVID is behind us, although she was not a medical doctor. Yet a skin condition, which is thought to be linked to Abu Jamal's hepatitis C infection, has left much of Abu Jamal's skin cracked, whitened, bloodied, and ruptured," Fernandez said. While Fernandez said she had photos of Abu Jamal's condition, she did not have permission to share them. "It's a horror show," Fernandez said about Abu Jamal's condition. Fernandez said Abu Jamal related to her that infirmary staff ought to be giving him daily medicinal baths to treat his skin condition per a prison doctor's recommendation over the weekend. Abu Jamal was not receiving those daily medical baths. Fernandez said Abu Jamal remains positive. "He wants to live," Fernandez said. Robert Boyle, an attorney for Abu Jamal, did not immediately return a call seeking comment. Fernandez reiterated her calls and those of Abu Jamal's supporters that he should be released from prison and receive medical care at a hospital. That a prisoner is being held under these conditions suggests that all standards of decency, morality, and humanity have eroded in American society, Fernandez said. Mumia is not alone. This is what medical care looks like in American prisons. Abu Jamal was rushed to a local area hospital on February 27th, soon after he was diagnosed with congestive heart disease. Abu Jamal was returned to Mahanoy SCI early last week. On Wednesday, it was revealed Abu Jamal tested positive for COVID-19. Abu Jamal, formerly known as Wesley Cook, was convicted of fatally shooting Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner after Faulkner had reportedly pulled over Abu Jamal's brother during a late-night traffic stop in 1981. In prison since 1982, Abu Jamal was on death row until 2011, when his death sentence was ruled unconstitutional. He is now serving life sentence. Abu Jamal and his supporters have always maintained his innocence, alleging that his trial was tainted by police corruption and racism. Yet Police Benevolent Association Lodge 5 and Maureen Faulkner, Daniel Faulkner's widow, among several others, have maintained the trial was fair and Abu Jamal guilty. Abu Jamal, who worked in black radio before his conviction, has published several books and commentaries during his decades in prison. He is appealing his conviction in Pennsylvania courts. So that's good that the COVID-19, but it does not, it's a searing indictment. It's a freaking searing indictment on, it's a searing indictment on the effects of illnesses in prison. And this is not the first story I've heard of prisoners not getting the health care that they need in prison. This is widespread. It's well known. Everybody knows it. Most people know how prisoners are treated in prison. There are TV shows dedicated, very, very popular TV shows. Orange is the New Black shows what it's like in women's prison. Oz on HBO, I think it was like 10 or 15 years ago, showed the conditions that men live in men's prisons. Then you have, this thing about, are trans women women? Are trans men men? The answer is yes, trans women are women and trans men are men, and trans women should go to women's prison and trans men should go to men's prison. But some of our state legislatures fucked that up, excuse my language, messed that up, and decided that, we're not going to accept trans women as women. We're going to say that they're still men and make them go. And they get killed and raped and tortured in men's prisons. And the same happens to trans men, although to not the same degree in women's prisons. But now I have some excellente news for you. Something that I'm super excited about. Let's see if I can find the story. Okay, I can't seem to find that story, but Mitch McConnell could be leaving the Senate. Okay. Could be, maybe. Or maybe he's just teasing us. He seems like he's just teasing us by saying that he might be leaving the Senate. Um, we know, the Grim Reaper doesn't want to leave. You know that. He called himself the Grim Reaper. Can you believe that shit? He doesn't care about anybody but himself and maybe his wife. If I've ever seen a narcissist, fucking Mitch McConnell is one. He's a goddamn narcissist. And you know what? Resist, baby. Resist all forms of tyranny. Resist all forms of oppression. So we'll see. But in the article that I read, he did say that if he decides to leave, he is going to knock power from the governor of his state so that Mitch McConnell can appoint his successor and not the governor. He doesn't want the governor to have any rights to do his job. So he's going to try to take away the governor's rights to appoint someone to finish his term, Mitch McConnell's term, if he decides to leave. Well, we'll see, right? And in another piece of excellent news, Biden, our President Joe Biden, and I'm going to give him kudos when I can, he halts transfer of Oak Flat sacred native land to a mining company. Beautiful, beautiful, just beautiful. I can't type for the crud. All right, from the Havana Times. Open-minded writing. Nice. Biden halts transfer of Oak Flat sacred native land to mining company. Excuse me. The Biden administration has withdrawn an environmental review for a massive copper mine in eastern Arizona. The move temporarily blocks a multinational mining corporation, Resolution Copper, from taking over a parcel of land sacred to the San Carlos Apache Nation and other native communities. The U.S. Forest Service said it needs more time to consult with native people about the mine's impact on Oak Flat. The site is an ancient forest with spiritual and cultural significance. Advocates say the proposed mine would destroy Oak Flat and contaminate a large swath of southern Arizona. Arizona Democratic Congressmember Raul Grijalva is set to reintroduce the Save Oak Flat Act. The bill would repeal the appropriation of the site. Well, that was a small little article, but that's some good news. That's some really good news. And hopefully, but the best news of the day, Real News Network. Brazil, Lula da Silva strikes back. Now, as many of you know, I first learned about Lula da Silva approximately 2 years ago from the wonderful Michael Brooks, who was on the Majority Report and on the his own show, The Michael Brooks Show. He introduced me to Lula da Silva and Lula Libre, Lula Libre, Lula Libre. Lula strikes back in a huge win for the left and for democracy. Brazil's Supreme Court has annulled corruption convictions against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, making it possible for Lula to challenge Jair Bolsonaro for the presidency in the next election. And angels wept. Yes, this is wonderful news for Brazil. This is wonderful, wonderful news for Brazil. Lula remains Brazil's most popular politician, especially in the wake of this week's bombshell news that he can again seek the presidency after Brazil's Supreme Court annulled a conviction from the politically motivated Operation Car Wash scandal. Jazil Noor discusses the context and consequences of this historic ruling with Brazil based journalist and longtime TRNN, the Real News Network contributor, Michael Fox.
If I were Bolsonaro, I would not sleep peacefully because I am sure that on January 1st, 2023, he will be passing the presidential sash to Lula.
Welcome to the Real News. I'm Jessel Miller. In a huge win for the left, a Brazilian Supreme Court judge on Monday annulled the criminal convictions against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a move that could allow the popular politician to run in next year's presidential election. Lula was released from prison in 2019, but was barred from running for office after a conviction on what's been described as trumped-up corruption charges by his political opponents. Lula is poised to challenge current far-right president Jair Bolsonaro, who is up for re-election in 2022, as Brazil continues to be ravaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. Lula was leading in the polls for the 2018 presidential race before the initial conviction ruled him out as a candidate. That opened the door for Bolsonaro, a right-wing lawmaker who won an election with the image of an anti-corruption outsider. Well, now joining us to discuss this is Michael Fox, a freelance journalist based in Brazil and longtime Real News collaborator. Thank you so much for joining us again, Michael.
Thanks, Jessel. Thanks for having me.
So it's calling him something like a Bernie of Brazil. And what struck me about one of your tweets about this latest news is that Lula continues to be one of the most popular figures in Brazil, despite being in jail and despite fighting to overturn these convictions.
Absolutely. So he is the country's, without a doubt, most iconic, historic labor leader, right? He led massive marches with labor unions at the very end of the dictatorship that kind of pushed forward democracy. He founded the Workers' Party and then ran the presidency several times before actually winning in 2002. He is kind of the iconic figure of the Brazilian left. And once he got into office, he then ushered in kind of a series of poverty alleviation programs focused on it was called Fome Zero, so zero hunger. You know, he was from the northeastern Brazil, the poor northeastern. As a young boy, he moved to Sao Paulo, and that's where his family had to move to find work. So he is like the iconic imagery of the poor northeastern Brazilian going in search of jobs, of employment, and then like lifting himself up and then fighting for what he was able to achieve. So he kind of fits within that imagery, that image of what so many people hope for and dreams. The fact that he actually won the presidency, was then able to kind of represent people around Brazil. He lifted millions out of poverty with his poverty alleviation programs. He installed, obviously, South-South ties. He was extremely important in kind of the pink tide movement in the regional tide in Latin America. And when he left office in 2010, he had an approval rating over 90%. So he is definitely a figure that people have enjoyed and loved and really appreciated his administration. The next president that came in was obviously was Dilma Rousseff. She won office in 2010. She was his former chief of staff. And then she won a re-election in 2014. Now that's when things became a little bumpy because obviously that was the whole impeachment push against Dilma Rousseff. They knocked her out. Her vice president comes in and completely starts to switch to just flip the script, right? To move away from the poverty alleviation and realign Brazil with the United States and move away from these South-South ties and start to push privatizations and a spending cap and whatnot. And so this is where Brazil, we see Lula at this moment as this figure. People saw him in 2018 as this figure who was going to be able to bring Brazil back, turn it back in the direction, and bring things back about. Because people really saw this impeachment against Dilma Rousseff as a congressional coup. It was really a maneuver to try and get the Workers' Party out of office. Now, of course, amidst all of this, there was tons of corruption, other things that were happening, not just with the Workers' Party, but other parties. But that's why Lula's imagery is so important. He was jailed in 2018. That blocked him from being able to run. And so the left's kind of focus, the unifying focus of the left in Brazil Brazil, obviously after 2016, was fighting the coup, and then it was really freeing Lula, getting Lula out of jail, and then getting Lula to have his political rights back to be able to stand for re-election, and that's where we are right now. So the decision yesterday by Supreme Court Justice Edson Fachin is a huge decision because this is exactly what so many people in the Workers' Party, social movements on the left have been really fighting for years, is to prove Lula's innocence.
And a lot of this is coming out of the reporting the Intercept Brazil and local outlets had published leaked chats and documents exposing the trumped up corruption charges against Lula. You know, as you said, who was enormously popular for his land reforms and redistribution of, you know, in a society that sort of has like, can be described as colonial levels of inequality. You know, it was, what he did was tremendous. Can you talk about if there's any indication those responsible will actually be held responsible for you know, for their role in this, and you know, what do you think is going to happen next year as you know, as another election is coming to result?
That's a great question, Jessica, because actually I need to unpack it just a little bit. First off, it's important to understand that what Supreme Court Justice Edson Fachin did was he absolved the cases in Curitiba, saying that they were not under the jurisdiction his cases should not have fallen under the jurisdiction of Curitiba. Now, of course, in order to understand that, we need to understand what was Brazil's car wash investigation. Right? It was the 7-year-long anti-corruption investigation that really flipped Brazil up on top of his head. There were 1,400 search and arrest warrants issued, 280 people were convicted, including top politicians, and of course one of them was Lula. Now, the question was, and this is what Edson Fachin focused on, was these corruption charges, which they had allegedly convicted Lula for, was that involved in this car wash scandal, this specific scandal? And what they always found was that, yes, it's fine to leave it in Curitiba. Curitiba, of course, was extremely controversial because this is where the anti-corruption task force was. This is where Judge Sergio Moro was. Right? Judge Sergio Moro was the judge who was presiding over these anti-corruption proceedings, who would then go on to be Bolsonaro's justice minister after he jailed Lula and many other things. And so that's important to understand because it puts us into this larger context. So what Justice Edson Fachin said was that was not the right jurisdiction. Those can now be sent to courts in Brasilia, federal courts in Brasilia. And this came at a time when actually Moro's his own bias, his own impartiality is under question, and that's what brings into this question of the Vaza Jato or the Intercept reporting, and that's why that is key. So the Intercept reporting began to be released in June of 2019. There were leaked telegram messages between members of the Anti-Corruption Task Force and Judge Sergio Moro, and basically what it showed was a bias by Moro and the task force against Lula, against the Workers' Party, and of course against the left. And it showed Judge Sergio Moro actually collaborating closely with members of the task force. So here you have an independent judge who was acting partially, acting biased, and actually supporting the prosecutors in this process against Lula and other things. And there's so many different layers of this that we can get into, but that's the important point here, is that it is very clear in what's been released in the previous years, and the whole reason why this is happening now is because it's been shown that the whole Lava Jato car wash investigation has been tainted and by this biased collaboration between Judge Sergio Moro and the task force. That's why this comes to a head now. Now, what's fascinating is literally today, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but literally today, the Supreme Court is now supposed to rule on the bias of the judicial bias by Moro in these cases. Even though Lula, the jurisdiction of the Lula's trials, those have been thrown out the door, and they may now be picked up by a federal court in Brasilia, Moro is still going to be, the Supreme Court is still supposed to decide over if Moro is biased or not. And that's extremely key looking forward to understanding. I mean, it has huge repercussions. Like I said, 280 people were convicted under this anti-corruption investigation that went on for 7 years and just closed a month ago. And so,
Okay, I put the link to that interview in the chat, so if you want to see the rest of that, you can. And I'm going to research better ways so I can. I tried Zoom, but that didn't work out very well. I'm not sure how to upload or how to screen share through YouTube Studio when I'm live streaming. So what I'm going to do starting tomorrow is through something like OBS software or some other kind of software that's going to help me be able to screen share and do things like that. So you guys don't just have to hear the audio of the videos that I'm playing or the links or the articles that I'm sharing with you. Okay. So we're going to move on to the main part of the show now. And we're going to talk about an article that is not really an article, but kind of an opinion piece. And I think you will enjoy this. This comes from, where did this come from? This came from the website. I believe this came from Counterpunch. Yes, this did come from Counterpunch from their Members Plus area. This is called Civil War 2.0 on the Boogaloo Boys, Reactionary Accelerationism and Coalition Building by Jack Delaney. On May 29th, 2020, in the wake of the police murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a Black Lives Matter demonstration marched about a half a mile from Oakland's Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building. Around 10 o'clock at night, outside the Federal Building, as the protest continued close by, bullets spewed from the vehicle, striking security personnel and killing one. About a week later, on June 6th, Santa Cruz County Sheriff's deputies were engaged in a firefight and attacked with improvised explosive devices, IEDs, claiming the life of one deputy. Shortly after, active duty U.S. Air Force Sergeant and self-identified libertarian Stephen Carrillo was arrested and charged for the pair of attacks. 5 days later, a second suspect, Robert Justice Jr., turned himself over to authorities. Both suspects have since pleaded not guilty to the charges. According to federal authorities, it appears the attacks were launched during the BLM protests to deflect suspicions or trigger a violent response against demonstrators. Investigators also found the word "boog" scrawled in blood on the stolen vehicle used by Carrillo, along with a Hawaiian-themed patch. Authorities later announced that Carrillo and Justice were linked to a group known as the Boogaloo Boys. Relatively unknown at the time, the Boogaloo Boys were just beginning to drum up media curiosity for their armed presence and eccentric appearance at BLM demonstrations. Boogaloo's obscurity would later change as the boys' showing at nationwide protests and media coverage continued. While earning analysis over the past... Sorry, my eyes are messing up. While earning analysis over the past year, penning down the Boog's ideology has proven difficult. Let's see if I can get it bigger. Can I... Okay, that's a little easier to see. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. While earning analysis over the past year, that doesn't sound right. While earning analysis over the past year, penning down the Boog's ideology has proven difficult for some journalists. At a glance, it appears that the Boogaloo Boys aren't concerned with ideological control. Oh, I got full bars. Okay, now I'm back. All right, excellent. But sometimes missed in analysis are the roots of the broader concept that holds the movement together. Also largely left out is how the Boogs use public relations spin and populist rhetoric to camouflage their core belief. Some on the American left have also misinterpreted the Boogaloo Boys' unifying principle and the foundation of their beliefs. While a small segment on the left urges to join with masked far-right accelerationism, the Boogs' actions, rhetoric, and unifying values should remind those calling for an alliance to instead focus on organizing alienated workers and standing unconditionally with dehumanized communities. The Boogaloo's birth. The Boogaloo Boys are described as an eclectic, loosely organized, and decentralized far-right movement that traces its roots to an online subculture of shitposters, gun enthusiasts, white supremacists, and anti-statists. Like other far-right factions, such as QAnon, the Boogaloo Boys emerged from 4chan, specifically under the /K/message board devoted to gun ownership, where the term Boogaloo was first coined in 2012. The group's namesake stems from absurdist internet humor and ironically references the 1984 musical breakdancing film featuring rapper Ice-T, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. In the context of the group's language, the term Boogaloo, along with Big Igloo and Big Luau, is a coded reference to impending helter-skelter or frenzied racialized violence to accelerate a second American Civil War. They call it Civil War II Electric Boogaloo. After stewing on the internet's abyss and then moving to mainstream platforms like Facebook and Discord, the Boogs brought their online presence to real life by joining a pro-Second Amendment rally at the Virginia State Capitol in January 2020. The boys earned coverage and social media attention for modeling Hawaiian shirts and tactical vests while carrying kitted out AR-15s, AK-47s, and bull rifles. Following the first public Boog online action, a major catalyst for growth and activity can be traced to the March 12, 2020 police murder of 21-year-old Boogaloo boy Duncan Lemp, also associated with the far-right militia group, the Three Percenters. After posting images on Instagram of armed individuals captioned with a Boogaloo reference, authorities issued a warrant citing Lemp for violating a prior court order that restricted ownership of firearms before the age of 30. Around 4 a.m, the Montgomery County Police SWAT unit executed a no-knock raid. I'm not in favor of SWAT units or no-knock raids, to be honest with you, because the no-knock raid is what killed Breonna Taylor, and these are absolutely not good. A no-knock raid of Lemp's Maryland home. Officials claimed the raid led to a confrontation between police and Lemp and that the house was booby-trapped. The Lemp's family legal team presented a different case. While Lemp remains a martyr to the Boogs, it's revealing that the group pays little homage to the circumstances behind the no-knock raid and police murder of Breonna Taylor, which occurred on the following day on March 13th. Hibiscus flowers and helter-skelter. Following Lemp's murder, the group's rhetoric continued into violent fantasy and materialized into further offline action. In early April, Texas Boog Aaron Swenson allegedly threatened to hunt down and kill cops on a Facebook live stream. After several emergency calls, Texarkana police tracked down Swenson, leading to a surrender after a high-speed chase. Swenson previously shared violent memes and messages in private Boogaloo groups after becoming distraught over the death of Lemp. In late May, around the same time as the Carrillo and Justice attacks, Ivan Hunter, a self-proclaimed leader of the South Texas Boogaloo Boys, was arrested for allegedly dispensing 13 rounds from an assault rifle at Minneapolis' 3rd Police Precinct after demonstrators seized and razed the building. Following his arrest, investigators discovered private messages between Hunter and Carrillo strategizing and boasting about their actions. Hunter messaged Carrillo to go for police buildings. Carrillo replied, "I did better," referencing his alleged attack in California. According to the Associated Press, on May 30th, 3 Boogaloos were arrested and charged for conspiracy to incite violence and commit acts of terrorism at a BLM demonstration in Las Vegas. Prior to their arrest, the trio had reportedly plotted to sabotage an electrical substation, yet told a confidential informant that the focus had switched to BLM protests. The 3 were detained and found in possession of Molotov cocktails and an unregistered firearm. Investigators suspect that the group was either attempting to attack BLM demonstrators or law enforcement to trigger a violent response against demonstrators. Like Carrillo and membership among some other far-right factions, all 3 were current or former members of the U.S. military. Military service is often a prerequisite shared in Boogaloo circles, more so than other far-right factions, as pointed out in the Daily Beast by Dr. Megan Squire, who researches online extremism at Elon University. The violent plots continued into early October 2020 when several Boogaloo members were implicated in the conspiracy to kidnap and murder Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The plotters' motives stem from perceived government tyranny regarding COVID-19 lockdowns and public health protocols. According to an NBC social media audit of the plotters' accounts, Brandon Caserta had posted references to Boogaloo and himself modeling a Hawaiian shirt. Similarly, 3 of the alleged plotters were regulars. Oh, let me turn on my light here, if I can find it. Okay. Hold on one second, guys. Although the light, I don't mind it. Okay. According to an NBC social media audit of the plotters' accounts, Brandon Caserta had posted references to Boogaloo and himself modeling a Hawaiian shirt. Similarly, 3 of the alleged plotters were regulars at Boogaloo and anti-lockdown rallies, according to the Washington Post. Boogaloos are also linked to the attempted insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, in which some participants were recorded hoping to commit executions of opposition lawmakers. The attempted coup was attended by factions across the far right, yet Virginian Boog Mike Dunn claimed that he led several groups that participated in the siege. Though some boys, B-O-I-S, boys, not boys, B-O-Y-S, B-O-I-S, some boys act on a desire to accelerate unrest into a civil war. Others share violent fantasies and coordinate public relations campaigns in private messages. In October of last year, Unicorn Riot, an independent left-wing reporting collective, leaked a duo of Boogaloo Discord servers that contained thousands of private messages. The servers Patriot Wave and Mujahideen of Liberty illuminate where the Boog's common political roots, fantasies, and rhetoric meet their actions. In the Patriot Wave Discord server, under the group channel Boogaloo Talk, one user shares blueprints of how to make a fence charge or an IED. Another user shows an infographic describing on designing a fortified machine gun position. Further along in the channel discussion, after users bicker over the optics of killing civilians and law enforcement, one user argues, people have to die. Have in capital letters. People, capital letters, H-A-V-E, to die. Though some Boogs disavow killing civilians, the vast majority of posters endorse the targeting of cops and federal agents, or alphabet boys, B-O-I-S, to trigger responses that they hope will accelerate toward the big luau. The Mujahideen of Liberty server reiterates similar sentiments along with overtly racist humor. One user posts a meme glorifying George Zimmerman, and another user posts a meme commemorating David Koresh's Waco, Texas armed standoff with federal authorities, a common obsession among sections of the far right. Another lays out how a combination of ammonia and bleach, a mustard gas-like chemical weapon, can be used to incapacitate law enforcement. Users similarly posted infographics of how to make IEDs and other explosives. Last January, Left Coast Right Watch, an outlet that covers politics and extremism, leaked Discord messages from another private Boogaloo server. The Citizens Liberty Organization public relations channel gives more insight into the Boog's savvy approach. Perceived savvy approach, not perception, perceived. For example, one user lays out a broad communication strategy, including a recruitment pamphlet to pass out at protests. The user writes, I would probably stay away from all the Boogaloo word, though. It would need something clearly peaceful but firm that detaches the movement from the things that the media from things that the media that tries to pin it with. The user continues, anything referencing the B word, death, violence, and so on, is to be avoided. You don't win people over by telling them that you're going to kill a bunch of people. Another user chimes in on the discussion. We need to steer from violence as much as possible, at least in text and to the public. Wow. In public statements, the group's unofficial leaders applied this detached approach to veil fantasies of civil war and accelerating chaotic conditions. Boog Tim Teagan told the Lansing State Journal, the Boogaloo boys want to restore freedom and unite people together. We can only have a good future through strength and unity, Teagan said at a Michigan anti-lockdown rally. In a Vice profile, Mike Dunn, a former U.S. Marine and Corrections officer who claimed to lead several groups in the U.S. Capitol insurrection, states, we, Boogaloo, stand for individual freedom for all, and we're willing to defend anyone's rights to those freedoms. Dunn continued to decry police officers in the piece, but a New York Times review of BLM protest footage shows them shaking hands and chumming around with law enforcement. In reference to Boogaloo's military connection and their readiness to confront the police, Dunn stated, we have the upper hand. A lot of the guys have knowledge that your normal civilians do not have. Police officers are not used to combating that type of knowledge, Dunn said. In another interview aired on ABC, when pressed on the issue of Boogaloo violence, specifically the Carrillo attacks, a boy who calls himself Shifty disavows them as lone wolves. He continues, "We do not condone violence or his actions. They were disgusting. He was not doing them in the defense of anyone's individual liberty." The facade alluding to unity and protecting liberty is usually dropped when referencing another martyr of the Boogaloo Crusade, Kyle Rittenhouse. During the Kenosha, Wisconsin uprisings, Rittenhouse, alleged to have shot and killed 2 BLM protesters, was photographed before the murders with armed Boog boy Ryan Balch. At least a dozen other Boogaloo boys were also documented standing with other far-right groups during the Kenosha demonstrations, taunting BLM demonstrators and allegedly protecting property. Rittenhouse isn't a known member of the Boogs, and his only tie to the group is through Balch. However, the boys often privately and publicly express support for him, a Boog who goes by Magnus Parvidya, a self-described right-wing anarchist. No such thing as a right-wing anarchist. Anarchism is left-wing. Who recently appeared on the Jimmy Dore Show to promote solidarity between the left and the far right, tweeted support for Rittenhouse prior to the interview. These guys they just want to usurp the left. They don't want to be in concert with the left. They just want to usurp the left. Again, the Boogaloo Boys and right-wing militias were claimed to be protecting corporate property and businesses throughout BLM demonstrations. In private discourse and in public statements, many do genuinely come off as simply gun-loving, government-hating, small business-centered libertarians. Some disavow those who unironically post arguments in favor of National Socialism, Nazism, and white supremacist ideals. This internal ideological difference is what makes Boogaloo's political commitments tricky to pin down for some. With that said, labeling the Boogaloo Boys' internal divisions as linked to specific right-wing tendencies is arbitrary. To understand the boys' galvanizing worldview, it's paramount to recognize the reactionary acceleration of politics inherent in the commonly held goal of advancing chaotic tension to spark an impending civil war. Aloha accelerationism. In The Atlantic, Michael J. Mooney correctly identifies Boogaloo's origins and presents the boys as expressing incoherency due to apparent internal divisions. There is proof of that at face value, but Mooney glosses over the ideological roots in the Boogs' shared fantasy of accelerating civil war. Looking at the evolution and the tactics of far-right accelerationism gives perspective on the Boogaloo Boys' common cause. Beauchamp, in a 2019 Vox piece, correspondent Zach Beauchamp offers a brief overview of accelerationism and draws connections to the current iteration of the far right. Beauchamp writes, accelerationists reject any effort to seize political power. Accelerationists are the ones who want to watch the world burn. Accelerationists reject any effort to seize political power through the ballot box, dismissing the alt-right's attempts to engage in mass politics as pointless. If one votes, one should vote for the most extreme candidate, left or right, to intensify points of political and social conflict within Western societies. Beauchamp continues, their preferred tactic for heightening these contradictions, however, is not voting, but violence. Attacking racial minorities and Jews is a way of bringing us closer to a race war and using firearms to spark divisive fights over gun control. The ultimate goal is to collapse the government itself. They hope for a white-dominated future after that. The Southern Poverty Law Center neatly sums up the underpinnings of the far-right version of accelerationist politics. Other ideological variants of accelerationism seek to push beyond capitalism by bringing it to its most oppressive and divisive form, prompting a movement to build a just economic system in response. In the case of white supremacists, the accelerationist set sees modern society as irredeemable and believes it should be pushed to collapse so a fascist society built on ethno-nationalism can take its place. What defines white supremacist accelerationists is their belief that violence is the only way to pursue their political goals. To put it most simply, accelerationists embrace terrorism. The genesis of reactionary accelerationist politics dates to the era of Nazi brown shirts and Mussolini. 4 weeks after Hitler was sworn in as chancellor of the Weimar Republic in 1933, fascist thugs torched the Reichstag. The arson was blamed on political opposition, and the chaos was used to consolidate power by manipulating public opinion through fear. As Nazi barbarism advanced, the brown shirts committed violent attacks and terrorism against those deemed undesirable, accelerating frenzied conditions that enabled the Nazis' support to fester. Mussolini similarly inspired mayhem and called on his mob of black shirts to seize the levers of state power, culminating in a successful fascist insurrection in 1922. Infamously known as the March on Rome, the successful fascist revolution inspired the Nazis' failed beer hall push the following year. By employing accelerationist tactics of generating chaotic conditions through violence and pushing liberal democracies to the brink of collapse, the founders of fascism would submit their power and create a legacy for future far-right movements. But the reactionary accelerationist playbook would cloak itself and evolve as the international far right held little formal recognition of state power following its defeat in 1945. In Italy's years of lead, an era of political and state-sponsored terrorism that took place from the late 1960s to the 80s, far-right accelerationism progressed. Coming out of the years of lead was the strategy of tension, which employed arsons, bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations as a way of heightening societal collapse, manipulating public opinion through terrorism, and scapegoating political opposition. The Italian far right, along with state actors, often feigned as left-wing groups and carried out violence against law enforcement and kidnapped public officials, which led to repression against the far right's political opposition. Though failing to collapse society, the far right's use of the strategy of tension led to the arrests and murders of thousands that opposed them. In the modern context, a 1978 American novel gave rise to far right accelerationism and invigorated white supremacist groups. The Turner Diaries, a reactionary fantasy novel depicting a white supremacist revolution at the U.S. Capitol in which Jews, people of color, and political opposition, civilian and elected, are exterminated, has been widely cited as inspiring numerous far-right groups and terrorists. The ideas housed in the reactionary fantasy would evolve into far-right manifestos and popular writings, which gained further traction in the Reagan era. In the 1980s, American Nazi Party member James Mason advanced the case for guerrilla warfare, assassinations, and mass killings to accelerate disintegration. The writings were popularized on the now defunct Iron March Forum, along with neo-Nazi outlets Stormfront and the Daily Stormer. Neo-Nazi groups like Atomwaffen have cited Mason's writings as a political program. The most horrific standing example materialized after the 2019 Christchurch, New Zealand mosque massacre. Before murdering 51 people and wounding another 49, white supremacist Brenton Harrison Tarrant, influenced by Mason's writing, wrote a section on his manifesto titled Destabilization and Accelerationism, Tactics for Victory. Tarrant, excuse me. Tarrant makes the case for initially cloaking white identity terrorism and then acting to usher in helter-skelter. Tarrant revealingly writes, whilst we may use edgy humor and memes in the vanguard stage and to attract a young audience, eventually we will need to show the reality of our thoughts and our more serious intents and wishes for the future. For now, we appeal to the anger and black comedic nature of the present, but eventually we will need to show the warmth and genuine love we have for our white people. Like the Boogs, Tarrant was attempting to inspire a version of Boogaloo. Unlike Tarrant's vicious acts and the tactics espoused in Mason's heinous writings, the Boogs are not known to have targeted civilians directly, although it is certainly debated in online spaces. With that said, the Boogs' method of attacking law enforcement to inspire a violent response and repression against their political opponents resembles the strategy of tension and the tactics of the Italian far right in the years of lead. As Tarrant lays out, since building a following based on dark, online, and reactionary humor, the Boogs are advancing past the vanguard stage into action. By attacking law enforcement and attempting to escalate confrontations between BLM demonstrators and their state and far-right opponents, the Boogaloo's reactionary accelerationism is a new, veiled spin on ginning up violence and repression against their enemies. Solidarity 2, rejecting an electric Boogaloo. The Boogs understand a civil war that will bring about mass violence and suffering, especially against marginalized black and brown people, is a hard sell. To cloak the unifying reactionary accelerationist cause, the boys excitedly skew how they are perceived with an inviting Hawaiian shirt and libertarian rhetoric. Though unified in softening the core belief of advancing violent conditions necessary for helter-skelter, the Boogs are also joined in opposing the values of collective ownership, working class fraternity, and egalitarian racial solidarity. As far-right accelerationism and neo-fascism, as far-right accelerationism and neo-fascism continue to rise and neoliberal austerity economics continues to plague everyday people, some purportedly on the left push for alliances with neoliberalism's critics on the right. Commentator Tim Black offers perspective on the organizing question and rejects this alliance. Black asserts that allying with the Boogs will create a partnership with white supremacy and that the left shouldn't organize with groups rooted in reactionary violence and coded politics. In Black's argument, he condemns the boys' mass politics, stating, the Boogaloo boys are like a soft clan. He continues to he continues to scorn some white leftists for seeking an alliance. Time after time, white American progressives, so easily throw us, Black people, to the wolves in order to accommodate their racist or bigoted brothers. This is another example. Though speaking broadly, Black is referencing a segment of the white American left that is often too comfortable with white supremacy. This is a very good point. Tim Black makes a good point that there are a lot of white leftists, white people on the left, who don't mind, who think it's okay, who think it's really okay to join forces with Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys. I mean, are we going to start working with, Stormfront, the Daily Stormer, and Adam Waffen? Seriously? These guys? No. No. Hell no. I am not Nazis. I am not getting in bed with Nazis. No effing way. That is not happening. Stressful. Why would progressives want to sacrifice an alliance with Black people for these guys? Black inquires and explains further. Don't you support Black folks in America's fight for civil rights and into discrimination and the fight against anti-Blackness? That's the problem with progressives. We need to come together, but not with racists or anti-Semites. Wrapping up his argument, Black continues, for us to unite with them, they would have to absolve all those affiliations. Black's argument advances that if individual Boogs were concerned with the struggle of Black people, they should leave the organization and denounce it due to its place within the white supremacist milieu. He concludes that this should be a demand placed on Boogaloo Boys if the left mistakenly pursues that alliance. Black's commentary is an important part of the white for the white American left to remember in building a working class movement. People of color are disproportionately working class and are an essential voice within the American left's vision for a workers' movement. While seeking to unite and build solidarity based on class politics, the struggle of workers of color against enduring white supremacy is too vivid to ignore. Building a working class coalition requires us to fight white supremacy, an intrinsic part of the capitalist system and the US's economic evolution. The class-conscious left cannot build power or maintain credibility by remaining willingly absent and confronting white supremacy and simultaneously uniting with violent white reactionaries. Choosing to align with white reactionaries over workers of color signals a worrisome comfortability with white supremacy, a fundamental misunderstanding of class politics, and ignorance behind the core structural beliefs of far-right tendencies. The Boogs' penchant for feigning solidarity with Black people is demonstrated by their willingness to embrace a racially sparked second civil war, as well as tactics that escalate conflict between BLM and the police. While signaling populist ideals, it's also evident Boogs aren't concerned with the left's egalitarian goals. Rather, the Boogaloo Boys' broad ideological commitments stem from a disempowered white identity and small property owner mindset, which leads to violent reaction in times of political instability and economic crisis. While unifying behind and cloaking violent accelerationist reaction, the Boogs' internal divisions also share the values of rigid social hierarchy, private property, and white identitarian signifiers. The boys ultimately seek to employ an opportunistic, cynical strategy of luring in the impressionable and exploiting them to build power. The Boogs are not a viable alliance for the left. To build a working class movement, white supremacy must be relentlessly confronted, and the politics of reactionary accelerationism must be rejected. Alienating the Boogaloo Boys by standing with and organizing oppressed people is a far better avenue for building a coalition that advances the left's common cause. Jack Delaney is a former policy analyst. He worked on issues relating to healthcare, disability, and labor policy, and is a member of the National Writers Union. Well, we are 1 hour and 40 minutes into the live stream. So let's get on to working class history. I think everyone should get this book, Working Class History. Okay, so now we are on, today is March 11th. We're going to read Working Class History from March 11th. I want you to be able to see this book while I read it. March 11th, 1845, the Battle of, I don't know, I think I need to get readers, guys. So, the Battle of Cora Kilaka took place. in Antarctica, New Zealand, with Maori rebels defeating British forces and seizing the town, now called Russell, including the Flagstaff War. The conflict ended in a stalemate exactly the following year. March 11, 1977, police shot and killed 24-year-old Francesco Lorusso, activist to the far left extra parliamentary group. Okay, guys, I can't read this right now because I can't see. I need to get readers to read that, but I will read it to you tomorrow, okay? There is a few other things I wanted to talk about today, but we only have, well, I guess we can continue to go, unless you guys need a break, or I might need a break. I'm a little tired, guys. So you know what? We'll pick this up again tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me today for the second installment, the second live stream of The Future is Socialist. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that you liked the show. I would appreciate it if you would join me every day, not every day during the week, Monday through Friday. I will have a live stream every Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. every Monday through Friday. I'm going to figure out how to screen share and possibly put this live stream on other platforms as well. So I'm behind the curve a little bit, trying to catch up, trying to figure out how to do this live streaming correctly. I will get it eventually. But I'd also encourage you to jump into the live chat and let me know what topics you'd like to see me go over in the future. Do you disagree with anything I said? Do you want to see me cover different things? Just let me know in the chat, or in the comments after the video is over. And please, if you get a chance, please subscribe to my channel and like the videos. It really helps me out a lot. And I'm trying to get this little channel up and going. Okay. Thanks, guys. I love you all so much. Even you right wingers, I do love you. I just don't want to work with you while you're saying mean things about other people that I love. Okay? All right. Have a wonderful day. And thank you so much. This is Emberly McCullough signing off for The Future is Socialist, episode 2.